Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. Unshaved, unbathed, unedited, and unscripted. Fueled by good, shade-grown organic coffee and other tasty nibbles. So let me start with the idea that the cheerful idea that we are failing Bernie Sanders. I got this idea from Benjamin Studebaker. Benjamin says the left press is failing Bernie Sanders, and he unpacks his argument. I was interested in where this would go because a search for Bernie or bust articles is what brought this up, and the left press has been nearly as reticent as the right press to talk about the Bernie or bust movement, which is why I started this show in the first place. But we're starting to see a few cracks in the wall, and this is one of them. Now, Benjamin makes the case that his blog doesn't have the kind of following that, say, Jacobin magazine has, and Jacobin doesn't have the kind of following that MSNBC or WAPO or the New York Times or the New York Magazine has. But he makes the point very clearly that the centrist liberal, and liberal is not, I'm not using that as a compliment, the centrist press looks to the left press for ideas as to what the left will accept. And so he says, why does the liberal elite read the socialist press? Two main reasons: by co-opting some of the ideas and language popularized in socialist publications, so they can triangulate with the socialist left. This enables them to retain a radical aesthetic and ensure that progressives continue to view them as friendly and trustworthy. So really, to boil that one reason down, it would be to say that they're controlled opposition. The what do you call them? The liberal elite, that's the best word for them, has used the left press for legitimacy. They try to make themselves legitimate by trying to be as friendly towards them as possible. Although a true leftist won't get invited on their shows as anything other than just a token. This number two reason is the socialist publications mark the left edge of the realm of acceptable discourse. And this is the real reason that I want to focus on. If the socialist press is willing to accept a policy or politician as left-wing, that person's status will go unchallenged. And he goes on to mention that Elizabeth Warren is that person. She has gone unchallenged until recently by the leftist press. The liberal press, the liberal elite press, reads the socialist press to figure out which liberal figures can be effective compromise candidates. And it was so heartening to see that he understands this, that the people at Jacobin understand this, that people, other fairly well-known leftists are waking up now, and they're starting to see that they're trying to get Elizabeth to be the anointed candidate in place of Hillary Clinton. So he talks about Joe Biden is, to the leftists, is a lying neoliberal warmonger. Kamala Harris is a two-faced cop. Pete Buttigieg is a McKinsey consultant. Beto O'Rourke doesn't stand for anything. And then it's clear to the elitist press that none of these people are acceptable to socialists. And the elitist press are smart enough to know that without the socialists, without the left, the real left, they can't win. That's showing that the Bernie or bust idea is a real idea. It's a potent idea, and the centrists, the elitists, know this. They want the left's votes, but they don't want to have to give us anything. That's a quote from his article. They want the left's votes, but they don't want to have to give us anything. So the end of the article is the best part. Jacobin has started in on Elizabeth with multiple critical pieces in the last few weeks. The shift in the polls and her success in winning the endorsement of the Working Families Party seems to have woken folks up. There is a genuine risk that the liberal elite will succeed in getting the progressive left to buy into Elizabeth Warren, and there is very little reason to believe that Elizabeth Warren can be trusted. He makes that argument earlier about Pocahontas. Warren has a long history of lying, deceit, and misrepresentation. She's written academic articles in defense of deregulation, supported Reagan during the 80s, obfuscates her position on Medicare for all, holds conventional hawkish foreign policy positions, and wrote an entire book blaming the consequences of neoliberal restructuring on women entering the workforce. She's taken conservative positions on economic issues, social issues, and foreign policy issues. She's already using corporate money from her 2018 Senate campaign to fund her 2020 run, and she promises to use more corporate money in the general election. Her signature contribution, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, has been effortlessly captured by the Trump administration. Now, all this has been known, but we're just now beginning to talk about it. He still thinks there's time to alert the neoliberal, elitist, centrist press that we won't accept her either. And once that message is clear, then we're going to have all hell break loose. Because if there isn't anybody that the centrists can foist on us, including Elizabeth Warren, if we can send that message soon enough, then things might go well. Now, what neoliberalism? This is important. This is, if you want to boil down neoliberalism and see it as a disease, as the disease it is, look at this title for this article. Goldman Sachs asks in a biotech research report, is curing patients a sustainable business model? If you jump to this to the new message, Bernie had to have a stunt. I think it's a fairly normal procedure, unexpected but normal. Sirota is the speechwriter of Bernie Sanders. Sirota cited a 2018 paper by researchers at the London School of Economics that found cardiac implant devices cost up to 6 times more in the United States than in some European countries with government-run healthcare systems. And Sanders, as you know, advocates an approach that would extend the existing Medicare program for Americans aged over 65 to all Americans and largely eliminate the private insurance industry. So what we've got here, we've got a disease. Goldman Sachs is part of the disease. And so Bernie Sanders is an existential threat to the health insurance industry, to the military industrial complex, to the prison industrial complex, to big pharma, to big money. That's there's Bernie. That is unacceptable. This centrist way of going at things. So we have to know what the disease is before we can cure it. And here is a podcast. Little Left of Center. And the OG of the Bernie or Bust movement, Victor Tiffany, was interviewed on this show. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'll link to it so you can play the whole thing. It's dated October 1st, so this is very recent. And the podcast interviewer asked Victor, what is a neoliberal? What is a liberal? What is the terms? I can't remember. I'll play the question for you so you can hear her exact question. And then Victor's answer, and then we'll stop. But I just want you to understand that unless you know what neoliberalism is, you're not going to understand why Elizabeth Warren is unacceptable. So here we go.
And as somebody who is involved in this, tell me the difference between progressive and liberal and Democrat.
Sure. So there's small d and capital D. Small d Democrat, which I am in a sort of radical way to the whole idea of revolt against plutocracy. Is we have a proposal for comprehensive campaign finance reform that would legalize democratic order in the United States so that people couldn't use their wealth to influence elections. We would all have equal contributions to candidates, to political parties, and political action committees. So Democrat is just either a party designation, or hopefully everyone in the country is a Democrat and nobody prefers dictatorship. As far as progressive and liberal, liberals will accept a lot less regulation for corporate behavior. Progressives have an understanding that there's something wrong, terribly wrong in this country in the amount of influence that corporations have in our whole political system. In fact, Chris Hedges makes it a point to argue that we are in a corporate state, and this happened actually before the Citizens United v. FEC decision. And we don't have a democratic order. We have an order that the corporations want us to have. And there's a sneaky, sort of almost hidden process underway over the last 30, 40 years where
That's important. You can't just say that Donald Trump is the disease. Donald Trump is a symptom of the disease. What you have to acknowledge is that 30 or 40 years at least, we've had neoliberalism. So we're not fighting Donald Trump. If you're truly a leftist, if you're truly a progressive, you realize we're fighting something that has been growing in cancerous fashion for probably more like 70 years, if you really get back to the roots of the disease that we're trying to cure here with the Bernie or bust movement.
Actual whole the ruling philosophy, the political philosophy of the ruling class has become not liberal, which is what it was much of American history, but what's called neoliberal. And there's a very specific agenda for the neoliberals. And there's a huge distinction between neoliberals and progressives. The neoliberals basically accept corporate governance and try to play.
Elizabeth Warren accepts corporate governance. She may want to rein them in a little bit, but she's not going to take them out of power.
Identity politics to get little incremental changes here and there. And progressives see this whole process of corporate governance as a threat to the American way, to the American republic, and really want to put their thumb down on corporate power and take power away from them, since they have usurped so much power.
Right.
And this has been done largely through so-called free trade agreements.
Free trade agreements are the way that corporations have usurped in traitorous fashion the power of the people. So if you're a Democrat, if you want democracy, if you want the people to decide and not corporations, you have to look at the actions over the last 70 years or so as treason. This usurping of power is treason. And so if you aren't feeling the revolutionary spirit, then you're not paying attention.
Free trade agreements these days are not your grandfather and my grandfather's free trade. Back then, free trade was defined as low tariffs or no tariffs and a prohibition against government manipulation of currency value. That was it. That was free trade. Modern free trade is really a threat to the American worker. It's a threat to the environment. It's a threat to democratic order and democratic power, in part because they use what's called investor-state dispute settlement chapters. I don't want to get too boring here, but basically they function as a kind of legalized corporate protection racket. You know what a criminal protection racket is? The criminals go up to a business owner and say, your building's going to be burned down this Saturday, but we'll protect you for 100 hours a week. We'll make sure these guys don't burn your building down, even though they're the ones who are burning the building down. And that's a criminal protection racket. And these investor-state dispute settlement tribunals are extrajudicial mechanisms by which corporations can sue the government, because the government has the gall to protect the water, to protect the air, to protect property rights of owners, property owners, and so forth. It's a very malicious and malignant trade regime that's gone way past the mechanisms of trade and into every aspect of economic life there is.
Yes. So you have to look at these transnational corporations as small nations. They're like their own nations, and they have no allegiance to any other nations, to the United States. They're a cabal that work together. The big boys are a small committee, and they work, they meet behind the scenes, they make sure that they stay in power, but they have no loyalty to the United States or to any other country. So what they're doing, what they have been doing sneakily, as he says, is treasonous. We need to bring them down. Look at Bernie. That is unacceptable. And that is that he's talking about. The power of the oligarchs, the power of the plutocrats. This is the power that we need to not negotiate with, to not talk them into doing better by the people. We need to take them out of power now. And that's why Bernie Sanders is an existential threat to neoliberals, to these transnational corporations, and to the elitist press, to the centrist elitist press. They're on the same team. They're just cronies of the plutocrats. We need to take them out of power too. And that's where this show comes in. So the more you share shows like this, the more you share articles like I'm quoting here, and podcasts and other YouTube channels that I quote on this show, the more you're helping to take down the mouthpiece of the powers of the plutocrats. So share broadly and keep on burning. Hope to talk to you tomorrow.